Ahoy hoy, this is Black Goat. I grew up in Hong Kong, so when I was a kid, what I watched on TV was the original Japanese MACROSS, licensed by our local TV station. Back then, I didn't even know that the version shown in the US was called Robotech. And here is the part that really surprised me later. Robotech has 65 episodes, but the MACROSS I watched only had 36. So where did the extra episodes come from? Years later, I finally learned the reason. At that time, American TV networks required at least 65 episodes to broadcast an animated series. MACROSS alone wasn't enough. So the producers took 3 completely different Japanese anime, MACROSS, Southern Cross, and Mospida, also pronounced Mospiada, and stitched them together in one long show. That show became Robotech. Later on, these 3 parts were officially named the MACROSS Saga, the Robotech Master, and the New Generation. Because MACROSS was the core story, the heart of Robotech was really built around those original 36 episodes. So, to make everything fit, the producers rewrote dialogue, changed the backstory, and added heavy narration, all to force 3 unrelated series into a single universe. And now, here is how Hong Kong handled it. The version aired in Hong Kong was barely edited, aside from a few shower scenes, Minmei scenes of course. Almost the entire story was kept intact. They even showed the devastated Earth after the Zentradi war without censoring it. And here's the funny part. The TV station only re-recorded the dialogue in Cantonese. They did not replace any songs. So you'd hear Cantonese voices, and the moment Minmei started singing, it suddenly switched back to Japanese. Then right after the song, it went straight back to Cantonese again. And yes, just to be clear, in case you don't know, people in Hong Kong speak Cantonese, not Mandarin. As kids, we thought this was completely normal. Later on, some anime started making Cantonese versions of their opening songs, but many shows still kept the original Japanese OP and ED. Honestly, it felt a bit strange, but hey, we got used to it. Actually, there was a Cantonese version of MACROSS OP, but that was not aired during broadcast on TV, so even many Hong Kong audiences didn't know that. That was really weird. So the real question is, what exactly did Hong Kong audiences watch? Or more accurately, what was the original Japanese MACROSS story? In October 1982, the Super Dimension Fortress MACROSS aired for the first time on TBS in Japan, and it went on to become an anime classic. In this video, I'll mainly focus on the 36-episode MACROSS Saga. This will be a full spoiler summary. Because the English and Japanese names are different, I'll mostly use the Robotech character names. I'm curious, how different is the version you watched from the one we saw in Hong Kong? The story begins in 1999. A massive object, more than 1,200 meters long, crashes on South Ataria Island in the South Pacific. At first, no one knows what it is. Investigators soon discover the truth. It's a giant alien battleship, far beyond anything humans could build. There are no life forms inside, but the impact destroys nearby cities. And it proves one thing very clearly. Humans are not alone in the universe. This discovery forces the world's governments to put aside their differences. They eventually form the United Nations government. But this doesn't happen overnight. Before unification, the world goes through several brutal wars. Only after years of conflict does the fragile peace finally return. During this period, the alien battleship is rebuilt, right on the original crash site. At first, it is given the code name Alien Starship 1, or ASS-1 for short. Later, after reconstruction is completed, it is officially renamed the Super Dimensional Fortress 1, better known as SDF-1 MACROSS. 10 years pass. The MACROSS is finally ready for its public launch. But on the day of the ceremony, something goes terribly wrong. The ship accidentally sends out a signal into space. The signal attracts an unknown alien force. They arrive almost instantly, using a technology called space fold. This race is known as the Zentradi, giant humanoid warriors, 5 to 6 times taller than humans. Because the MACROSS still contains a hidden automatic defense system, basically a booby trap, one of its cannons fires without warning. It hits the Zentradi fleet, and just like that, a war begins by accident. The Zentradi want to capture the MACROSS, so they keep attacking, but they deliberately avoid destroying it. Now let's talk about our main character. Rick Hunter is not a soldier, he's just a stunt pilot. When the Zentradi attack Earth, Rick is pulled into the conflict completely by another accident. This is his first time piloting a real combat machine, and unsurprisingly, he loses control. Rick crashes straight into the home of a Chinese-Japanese girl named Minmei. That's how they meet, literally by crashing into each other's lives. Rick is later rescued by Roy Fokker, his best friend and mentor. In Japanese terms, Roy is his senpai, or even his aniki, a true big brother figure. During the battle, Rick sees something unforgettable. For the first time, he comes face to face with a Zentradi soldier, a towering giant sitting inside a massive battle pod. And from that moment on, there's no turning back. Facing an enemy far stronger than anything they expected, Captain Henry Lovell is forced to make a desperate decision. He activates the space fold system, but the result is catastrophic. The MACROSS, along with several nearby ships, and even part of the island city itself, is teleported all the way to Pluto's orbit. Many civilians were already hiding in the shelters, most likely air raid shelters, I guess. Because of that, Lovell orders them to be moved inside the MACROSS. The ship is enormous, large enough to support a temporary city, and so begins a very strange chapter in human history, where civilians and soldiers live together, even fight together, inside a massive battleship drifting through space. Inside the ship, life goes on. Minmei and her relatives reopen their Chinese restaurant, now located deep inside the MACROSS. Encouraged by Minmei, Rick decides to join the military, serving under Roy's command. After surviving a dangerous mission on Mars, Rick earns a commendation, gets promoted, and is assigned 2 squad mates, Max Starling and Ben Dixon. Meanwhile, Minmei enters a beauty contest. She wins the title of Miss MACROSS. That moment changes everything. Her singing career takes off, and she instantly becomes the ship's most beloved idol. After joining the military, Rick works closely with his superior officer, Lisa Hayes. Lisa comes from a straight military family. She once had a first love, a man who died young, also on Mars. When she meets Kyle, Minmei's cousin, he reminds her of that old memory. For a short time, she projects her feelings onto him, but it doesn't last long. Kyle only cares about Minmei. He openly hates the military. Very quickly, Lisa realizes he is nothing like the man she once loved. As time goes on, and after many shared experiences, Lisa slowly begins to develop feelings for Rick. And just like that, Rick finds himself trapped into a complicated 4-way emotional mess between Minmei, Kyle, Lisa, and himself. That said, most viewers don't take Kyle very seriously. He talks big, makes situations worse, and is generally useless. So in the end, most people focus on what really matters, the classic love triangle: Rick, Minmei, and Lisa. Let's get back to the main story. The Zentradi are, at their core, a race that knows only war. They have no entertainment, no music, no art, no culture at all. Although they have 2 biological sexes, male and female Zentradi, are almost always deployed separately, basically operating as two independent armies. There's no normal interaction between the sexes. Concepts like romance, love, or family simply do not exist. Every piece of their technology is designed for one purpose only: combat. For over 500,000 years, the Zentradi have been conquering civilizations across the galaxy, occupying planets and wiping out countless cultures in the process. Then, during the battle, something completely unexpected happens. A group of frontline Zentradi soldiers who have almost never encountered female presence accidentally intercept a live broadcast of Miss Macross. The shock is overwhelming. They're confused, terrified, and deeply disturbed. They even begin to suspect that these tiny humans, which they call microns, might be using some kind of new psychological weapons. Commander Britai and his advisor Exador become curious. To them, human culture feels dangerous, but also fascinating. They decide to capture a few prisoners for interrogation, hoping to learn more. By coincidence, this happens at the worst possible moment. After arguing with Rick, accusing her of not understanding frontline danger, Lisa, frustrated and stubborn, decides to personally lead a reconnaissance mission. It goes badly. She gets captured. Rick's team rushes in to rescue her, but things spiral out of control. Rick, Ben, and Lisa all end up as prisoners. Only Max manages to escape, and he immediately starts planning a rescue. The interrogation is led by Supreme Commander Doza, and very quickly, Lisa and the others realize just how alien Zentradi society truly is. The Zentradi don't even understand what civilians are. They also have no idea how humans reproduce. So when Ben casually says, "Well, first you kiss, then you hug, and then..." the Zentradi panic. They urgently demand a demonstration. Thankfully, Ben doesn't start explaining human biology. Otherwise, this scene would have gone into a very different direction. Doza orders Lisa to demonstrate a kiss. Lisa, of course, knows how to choose. She picked the better option, Rick. The moment they kiss, the Zentradi reacts as if they've witnessed something supernatural. They tremble, they scream. Terrified by what they've just seen, Doza immediately throws them back into detention. Meanwhile, Max sneaks through the ship, disguised as a Zentradi soldier, and successfully rescues the others. And this entire sequence makes one thing very clear. The Zentradi may be great fighters at combat, but when it comes to anything else, their intelligence is, let's say, extremely limited. After the escape, Doza explains the truth to his subordinates. Long ago, the Zentradi lost all real knowledge of Proto-culture. No one remembers what it truly was. Only the ancestral warning remains. If they come into contact with Proto-culture, they will lose their will to fight. To investigate this dangerous phenomenon, the three soldiers who watched Minmei's beauty pageant volunteer for a risky mission. They agreed to be micronized and infiltrate the MACROSS themselves. Although the MACROSS manages to return to Earth, a new problem quickly emerges. On the way back, the United Earth government discovers something shocking. The Zentradi were only targeting the MACROSS. They weren't attacking the rest of the Earth. Because of that, the space fleets never stepped in to help. In fact, they were planning to use the MACROSS and the civilians inside it as bait to stall the Zentradi and buy time. So when the MACROSS finally arrives back home, even after Captain Gloval and Lisa give detailed reports about the Zentradi threats, the government does nothing. They refuse to send aid. They even forbid the civilians on the ship from returning to their homes. The government had already declared that the civilians lost during the Spaceflight incident were all dead, and they kept that secret from the public. As a result, the people on board the MACROSS are effectively turned into space refugees, abandoned by a very planet they came from. During this time, tragedy strikes. Roy Fokker dies in battle. Even though he's fatally wounded, he makes it back to the MACROSS and pretends he's fine, then plays one last song on his guitar for Claudia, and the pineapple salad stays on the table. After Roy's death, Rick inherits his Valkyrie. Thanks to Captain Gloval's efforts, the MACROSS eventually receives permission from the North American Ontario Autonomous Region to shelter its civilians. But before they can settle, another crisis erupts. The extremist Zentradi commander, Chiron, defying orders to stand down, launches a brutal attack on the ship. To protect the civilians, Gloval activates the MACROSS's strongest defense systems. Unfortunately, the system overloads and triggers a massive explosion. The enemy forces are wiped out, and the MACROSS survives, but the city below is completely destroyed. Rick's squadmate, Ben, is killed in the blast. After the attack, Rick wants to seek comfort from Minmei, but she has no idea he nearly died, or that he just lost a close friend. She only complains about everyday's problems. That leaves Rick heartbroken and deeply disappointed. After this disaster, the Ontario region withdraws its offer to shelter their citizens on MACROSS. With nowhere left to go, and after resupplying one final time, the MACROSS leaves Earth entirely, becoming a wandering battleship in space. Meanwhile, the three Zentradi spies who watched Minmei's pageant return to their fleet. They report what they've learned about human culture to their superiors, and also share with their comrades, showing off their personal collections. Many Zentradi soldiers become fascinated, especially by Minmei's singing. Some of them even become her fans without realizing it. This cultural curiosity spreads slowly at first, just as the ancestors once feared. As they continue fighting later battles, many Zentradi begin to feel guilt for destroying human cities. The motivation to fight starts to fall, and some even develop anti-war feelings. Eventually, the three spies and several of their comrades plan to micronize themselves and defect. They seek asylum aboard the MACROSS. Although many officers oppose this, Gloval, Lisa, and Rick believe that welcoming them might be the best chance to stop the Zentradi and finally achieve peace, so they decide to accept them. Around the same time, another memorial event takes place. The elite female Zentradi pilot, Miria, frustrated after repeatedly losing to Max, asks to be micronized so she can infiltrate the MACROSS and defeat him on human terms. But whether it's in video games or in real combat, she still loses again and again. She even asks for an honorable death. Max instantly falls for her, and, in true anime fashion, proposes on the spot. Because this union symbolizes the bridging of two civilizations, Captain Gloval approves the cross-species marriage. He even organizes a grand wedding ceremony in space. Brita and Exodore watches the broadcast from afar, and the curiosity about human culture only grows. Supreme Commander Doza refuses to compromise. He insists on following the ancestral directive. Proto-culture must be eliminated before it spreads any further and corrupts their forces. He immediately orders the destruction of the MACROSS, but this time something is different. Across the front lines, many Zentradi soldiers simply refuse to obey. Unlike their superiors, Britai and Exodore are far more open-minded. They begin to question not just the order they've received, but even the ancient traditions passed down by their ancestors. With his troops unwilling to fight, Britai makes a bold decision. He sends Exodore as a representative. Exodore undergoes micronization and heads to the MACROSS to negotiate a ceasefire. As Exodore walks through the city streets, he is endlessly fascinated by everything he sees: food, music, dresses, movie posters, daily life. He asks question after questions, to the point where his escorting officer looks increasingly embarrassed. After a series of discussion, Exodore reaches a crucial conclusion. Human culture is the proto-culture their ancestors warned them about, the original culture. And more importantly, this culture, especially music, has the power to influence soldiers' morale in battle. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the government has already made up its mind. The United Earth government, led by the Admiral of the Global Military, also aka Lisa's father, does not believe peace is possible. In secret, they've been constructing a massive super weapon deep in the Arctic, preparing for one final counter-strike. By now, Dozer has mobilized the largest Zentradi main fleet ever assembled. His goal is simple: destroy the Macross and wipe out all of human civilization. Britai soon realizes something horrifying. All Zentradi forces stationed near Earth, including his own fleet, have already been labeled as contaminated by Proto-culture. The main fleet intends to destroy them as well. Understanding there is no turning back, Britai persuades Anzonia, the leader of the female Zentradi forces, to join the humans in a united resistance. They also adopt Rick's proposal to use Minmei's singing. Her songs could boost the morale of the allied Zentradi forces, while simultaneously overwhelming the enemy with cultural shock. On the eve of the decisive battle, Rick gives Minmei a final farewell kiss. It quietly marks the end of their relationship. Then the battle begins. Dozer launches a full-scale assault. The Earth military fires their super weapon, inflicting devastating losses on the Zentradi main fleet, but the cost is unimaginable. Earth's forces are completely annihilated, and more than half of the Earth population is killed in the devastation. Chiron, no longer loyal to Dozer, still refuses to join the United Alliance. Instead, he withdraws and preserves his strength, setting the stage for conflicts yet to come. Amid the chaos, Rick's Valkyrie is critically damaged and crashes back onto Earth. He receives a distress signal from United Force headquarters and rushes to the site. There, he rescues the only survivor, Lisa. Under covering fire from the Zentradi allies, the Macross charges strike into Dozer's command ship. At last, Dozer is defeated, and finally, the Great War comes to an end. In the 2 years of following the Great Space War, Earth is left in ruins. Humanity barely survives. The only remaining population consists of a small number of humans. The civilians who lived aboard the Macross and the Zentradi who have integrated into human society. In space, Earth representatives Lisa, Claudia, and their team continue working with Britai to uncover more secrets surrounding proto-culture. However, progress is painfully slow. After what happened on the Macross in the very beginning, a battleship secretly rigged as a booby trap, they've learned one lesson the hard way. Any careless action could trigger catastrophic consequences. At the same time, they attempt to persuade other Zentradi forces to surrender. Besides military pressure, they rely on far more terrifying weapon, cultural shock. First, they broadcast Minmei songs. If that doesn't work, they escalate. Then they ask Lisa and Rick to kiss. Surprisingly, or perhaps not, these two simple acts are enough to cause many Zentradi officers to completely lose their will to fight. And then things get even worse. Max and Maria now have a daughter, Donna Sterling. They also bring her along on the mission. Whenever Zentradi soldiers encounter a baby, their psychological defenses collapse almost instantly. At that point, resistance is futile. The unified forces accept all Zentradi willing to surrender. Those who insist on destroying proto-culture or who even attempt to kill their own comrades after exposure to it, are swiftly neutralized. Back on Earth, the assimilated Zentradi live alongside humans. Some remain in their giant forms, others choose to live as microns of human size. Having known nothing but war, they now have to learn human life from scratch. Working in factories, helping with construction, and of course, listen to Minmei singing. Gradually, many begin to adapt, but not everyone succeeds. For some, their long-suppressed battle instincts resurface in emotional outbursts and violent conflicts. Rick and his colleagues conduct regular patrols and occasionally encounter Zentradi suffering complete psychological breakdowns. Since this is now an era of peace, Rick tries to resolve these situations without force. Sometimes other Zentradi even step in to help calm their comrades. Still, not everyone chooses coexistence. Some abandon human society entirely. They refuse to work and instead join Chiron, who has been hiding on Earth alongside Azonia and his followers, quietly preparing new attacks against humanity. Meanwhile, Minmei returns to Earth and continues performing as a wandering singer, with Kyle acting as her manager. But Earth is devastated, resources are scarce, audiences are small, money is almost non-existent. Often, her performances are paid for with basic living supplies instead of cash. Kyle grows increasingly resentful of his life. His personality deteriorates. He lashes out at Minmei, loses his temper constantly, and slowly transforms from a former antagonist into something closer to a joke. Rick notices this, but since his relationship with Minmei is already over, he keeps his distance. Around this time, Exodore uncovers another critical truth. Both humans and Zentradi were created by Proto-culture, but with very different purposes. Humans were meant to evolve beyond war. The Zentradi were born for it. Although many Zentradi changes after exposure to humanity, not all of them truly accept human culture. Chiron and Azonia, for example, are willing to enjoy certain comforts of civilization, but they refuse to abandon their warlike nature. And this part is my own interpretation. Judging by Azonia's behavior, it is very possible that she has already been exposed to proto-culture far more deeply than she's willing to admit. Trying to rebuild his remaining forces, Chiron comes up with a desperate plan. He attempts to steal humanity's microning device, hoping to restore microned Zentradi back to giant form and launch a renewed attack. Because of Kyle's stubbornness and the foolish decision of certain humans, Chiron actually succeeds. He captures both Kyle and Minmei and threatens the Earth government, demanding the surrender of the MACROSS. But humanity refuses. A rescue operation is launched, and after a fierce confrontation, Minmei and Kyle were successfully saved, forced Chiron to retreat once again. When Minmei reunites with Rick, she can't help but rush into his arms. The truth is simple. She has always missed Rick, and Rick has never fully forgotten her either. Lisa witnesses this moment, and it deeply unsettles her. She and Rick were never officially a couple, and now everything feels painfully unresolved. That night, Lisa confides in Claudia. Claudia comforts her and shares her own memories of Roy, reminding Lisa that unresolved feelings only grow heavier with time. She gently encourages Lisa to be honest and make up with Rick. The next day, Lisa and Rick plan a date, but Rick runs into trouble. Zentradi causing disturbances, and he rushes off to stop them, leaving Lisa waiting for hours. When he finally arrives, Lisa notices something that breaks her heart. The scarf Rick puts around her neck has Minmei's name on it. That's the final straw. Angry and hurt, Lisa storms off. Meanwhile, after a serious argument with Kyle, Minmei goes Rick's home in distress and ends up staying the night. Lisa later visits and discovers Minmei there. She doesn't confront them. she simply turns around and leaves. Later, Lisa tells Claudia that she feels inferior to Minmei and decides to step aside, allowing Rick and Minmei to be together. She even considered resigning from the military just to avoid seeing Rick every day. At the same time, fearing future attacks, the Earth government begins construction of a new space battleship. Global, now promoted to Supreme Commander, invites Lisa to serve as its captain. The offer places her in an impossible dilemma. In the last episode, Chiron launches one last desperate assault with his remaining forces. Global, Lisa, and the crew reactivate the MACROSS. Chiron's army is utterly defeated and driven to a suicide attack. Although heavily damaged, the MACROSS fires one final decisive strike. Chiron and Azonia die together. Humanity, along with the Zentradi who have integrated into human society, achieves its final victory. Proto-culture survives. Although the TV series does not explicitly show it, according to latest sources and official materials, most of the bridge crew, including Global, Vanessa, Sammy, and Kim, survive in the battle and are mentioned again in later stories. Unfortunately, there is no clear information about Claudia's fate. In the aftermath, Rick finally understands the truth. At the edge between life and death, he realizes that the person he truly loved is Lisa. This time, he makes his choice. The two finally come together. Minmei understands this as well. She quietly steps away and chooses to pursue her dream to become a true singer. And with that, the story comes to an end. This has been the full storyline of the MACROSS saga. If you watched Robotech, some events may feel different from your memory, largely because the Robotech version rewrote parts of the story to connect with the later arcs. The material is extremely dense, and condensing it into a single video is not an easy task. If you're interested, I may make another video in the future covering the theatrical movie version of MACROSS, also known as Do You Remember Love, which tells a similar story, but also in a very different way. If you have any thoughts or corrections, please feel free to share them in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to like, comment and share. I'm Black Gold, see you in the next video. When I was younger, I honestly found the Zentradi's fear of proto-cultures kind of ridiculous. I used to think, come on, listen to music, watching movies, seeing people kiss. Can things like that really scare a warrior race to this extent? I felt exaggerated, almost silly. But many years later, after watching the real world more closely, that feeling slowly changed. I saw news reports of people in North Korea being punished, even executed, simply for secretly watching South Korean TV dramas. I saw South Korea responding to border provocations by blasting K-pop across the border with loudspeakers. And that was when it finally clicked. There are leaders in this world who are genuinely terrified of their own people being exposed to modern culture. No weapons, no armies, no technologies, but songs, stories, movies, images of how other people live. What once felt absurd in an animated series turns out to exist in reality. Proto-culture was never just science fiction. It was a metaphor, and the truth behind it is far darker than I've ever expected. It is so ironic.